They were never meant to be found.
Every grave hides a story.
Some stories should stay buried.
Some houses do not simply stand on the land. Some houses wait. And sometimes, when you pass them from the road, you feel it before you understand it. Your hands tighten on the reins. Your eyes move toward the windows. Something inside you says, keep going. That is how it began for Lemuel and Verity Ashcroft. A tired husband, a tired wife, two worn-out horses pulling a wagon full of everything they owned, and a road that should have taken them somewhere, but instead led them deeper into a place no map seemed willing to admit existed. It was the autumn of 1876, the kind of dry, bitter autumn old farmers used to call stingy. The leaves had turned, but they had not fallen. The corn stood short in the fields. The wind had a sharp edge to it, especially in the ridges west of Virginia, where roads from Lynchburg became thinner and thinner until they were not really roads anymore. Just wagon ruts. Then footpaths. Then nothing but a suggestion through the trees. Lemuel Ashcroft was 34 years old, a saddler by trade. He was the sort of man who measured twice, spoke once, and kept his worries folded away where his wife could not see them. His hands were thick from work. His shoulders had bent slightly from years over a bench. Gray had already started at his temples. His wife, Verity, had just turned 29. She was small, quiet, watchful. She had dark eyes and a long scar on the back of her left hand that she never explained, not even to Lemuel. That day, she wore a brown traveling dress, and he wore a tan canvas coat with the collar turned up against the cold. They were trying to reach a town called Hollowmount. A man there, Ezra Whittingham, had written to Lemuel and promised work at a tannery. It was not much, but it was enough to begin again. So they had packed their life into one covered wagon. A tin of coffee, a Bible from Verity's mother, $22 in savings. A pistol Lemuel had not fired since the war. That was all they had. And by the 11th day on the road, even that began to feel like too much weight. The map Lemuel had bought in Lynchburg had lied to him, not in one big way, but in small, confident ways. A ridge appeared where no ridge should have been. A creek crossed the trail where the paper showed dry land. And then, near evening, the road ended. Not faded, not split. Ended. As if whoever had been building it had suddenly changed their mind. Lemuel stopped the wagon in a small clearing. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The horses stood with their heads low, steam lifting from their nostrils. Verity looked at the trees ahead. "Lem," she said softly, "this is not right." He did not answer at first. He climbed down, walked back the way they had come, and found the tallest pine he could manage. From the top, he looked east, south, and west. Nothing. Only trees. But to the north, above a stand of poplars, he saw smoke. A thin gray line rising into the cold evening air. Not forest smoke. Chimney smoke. When he came back down, Verity already knew from his face that he had found something. "There's a house north of here," he said. "Maybe a farm. We can ask the way." She looked in that direction. The horses shifted uneasily. "I don't like it," she said. "We cannot stay here without knowing where we are. And if the people there are worse than the woods?" Lemuel looked toward the dimming sky. "Then we come back and sleep in the wagon." But neither of them believed that. They turned north. It took nearly 2 hours to reach the smoke. The land rose, dipped, and rose again. The horses pulled badly at their bits. The light changed from gold to amber, then to that strange gray-blue hour when the sky still holds daylight, but the ground has already entered night. Then they saw the house. It sat at the bottom of a shallow bowl in the land. A long, pale farmhouse with a wraparound porch, a chimney at each end, and a barn behind it. There was also a smokehouse and a spring house with a sloped roof. The whitewash had grayed with age, and the windows caught the last light like dull glass eyes. The yard was clean. That was the first thing Lemuel noticed. Too clean. No scattered leaves. No tools leaning against a wall. No chickens scratching near the steps. No dog barking at strangers. No sound of animals from the barn. A real farm had noise. A real farm had mess. A real farm leaned and breathed and smelled of work. This place did none of those things. The second thing he noticed was the silence. Woods are never truly silent. There is always something. A bird shifting. A squirrel in the leaves. Wind moving high above. But the bowl of land around that house had gone dead quiet. Verity noticed it too. She said, almost under her breath, Lem, I do not want to stop here. He watched the chimney smoke rising steady from the west side of the house. Someone is home, he said. That does not comfort me. He looked at her then. Really looked. Her face was pale in the failing light. We'll knock, he said. We'll ask the way. If it feels wrong, we leave. But the problem with wrong places is that they rarely show all of themselves at the door. They came down the slope slowly, the wagon creaking behind them. As they got closer, more details began to trouble Lemuel. The barn doors were shut tight and padlocked. At that hour, in October, a working barn should have been open. The pasture fence was strong and well kept, but there were no animals inside it. No hoofprints. No churn mud. The dirt looked as smooth as a swept floor. The house had no curtains. Every window was bare. Inside, all the rooms were dark except one. A kitchen window on the north side held a single oil lamp. And behind that lamp, for just a moment, Lemuel saw a figure standing perfectly still, watching them. Then it was gone. Or maybe it had never moved. Maybe, he told himself, it was only a coat on a hook. The front door opened before they reached the porch. A man stepped out. He was tall. Too tall. Maybe, or maybe the porch made him seem that way. He was lean in the hard mountain way, with a long jaw, gray hair combed back wet, and a clean white shirt buttoned to the throat beneath a black vest. His boots were polished. That bothered Lemuel. Polished boots on a farm in October. The man's face was blank when he first appeared. Empty, almost. Then suddenly a smile spread across it. Warm. Wide. Welcoming. Like someone had lit a lamp behind his skin. Travelers, the man said. Well, my goodness. Travelers on this road. Lemuel introduced himself and his wife. The man bowed his head slightly. Cash and Pell, he said. My sister and I keep this place. Since our father passed, it has been only the two of us. Then his smile deepened. And the Lord has brought you here for a reason. Hospitality, Mr. Ashcroft. That is reason enough. He insisted they come inside. A hot supper. A soft bed. For empty rooms upstairs, he said. No Christian man would allow strangers to sleep in the cold while he had clean sheets waiting. Every word was right. That was what troubled Verity most. His kindness felt prepared. Practiced. Like a coat he had put on when he saw them coming. Cashin led the horses to the barn himself. He took a key from a nail, opened the padlock, and guided the animals inside. Lemuel did not follow, but when the barn door swung open, he caught a smell. Not hay. Not manure. Something sweet and heavy. Like fruit left too long in a sealed jar. He told himself it was molasses. Inside the house, a woman was setting the table. She was thin. Very thin. Her gray dress hung from her body as if it had once fit her better. Her hair was parted severely down the middle and pulled back tight. When Verity entered, the woman turned and smiled. The same smile. Exactly the same as Cashin's. As if brother and sister had practiced it together in a mirror. My name is Honoria, she said. The table was already set for 4. Verity noticed that immediately. They had not been expected. And yet there were 4 plates. Supper was served warm. Roasted chicken, bread, stewed apples, pickled beets, coffee, cream in a small pitcher. Everything looked proper. Everything smelled good. Lemuel ate because he was hungry. Verity ate slowly. She watched Honoria's hands. They shook when she set down a dish. Not the trembling of age. The trembling of someone who had been afraid for a very long time. Then Verity looked around the kitchen. The pots were spotless. Not clean. Spotless. Like they had never been used. The kettle had no soot. The wooden spoon was unstained. No crumbs on the breadboard. No apple peel in the bin. A full meal had been cooked there. And yet the kitchen looked untouched. Cashin talked through supper. He talked about the weather. He talked about the county moving the road. He said young people sometimes wandered that way because of bad maps. He talked about his father, a circuit preacher who had built the house by hand. He spoke warmly. Easily. But he never once looked at Verity. He offered her bread. He refilled her coffee. He gestured toward her politely. But his eyes never landed on her face. Lemuel did not notice that until later. Verity noticed it right away. After supper, Honoria led them upstairs. The room had not simply been made up. It had been prepared. Fresh white sheets. 2 pillows. A folded quilt. A pitcher of water on the washstand. A clean towel. Dried lavender and yarrow in a small vase on the windowsill. A Bible rested on the bedside table. Open to Lamentations. A small fire had been lit in the fireplace. Honoria stood in the doorway and pointed to the door. "The latch is here on the inside," she said. "Use it." Then, as she turned to leave, she looked only at Verity. Her voice dropped so low Lemuel did not hear it. But Verity heard every word. "If someone tells you to come downstairs in the night," Honoria whispered, "do not come downstairs." Then she was gone. The door clicked shut. Verity sat on the edge of the bed and did not move. Lemuel, standing near the fire, looked at her. "She's a strange one," he said. Verity nodded. "Are you all right?" She looked at the door. "I will be in the morning," she said. Lemuel knew his wife well enough to understand that was not the same as yes. He did not press her. He removed his boots, folded his coat over the chair, and took the pistol from the inside pocket. He placed it on the small table beside him, close enough to reach without thinking. When they lay down, neither of them changed into night clothes. Neither said why, and neither of them slept. For a while, the house was quiet. Then the ceiling began to creak. Something was walking in the attic. Not mice. Not wind. A slow, steady pacing. From one end of the attic to the other. Turn. Back again. Turn. Back again. Lemuel sat up. "Mice," he whispered. Verity said nothing. They both knew it was not mice. After some time, the walking stopped. Then downstairs, the front door opened. They heard it clearly. Open. Close. Footsteps crossed the front room. A chair scraped against the floor. Then Cashin's voice, low and calm, as if speaking to someone who had just arrived. Another voice answered. A man's voice. Not Honoria. Lemuel rose from the bed. Verity grabbed his wrist. Only then did she tell him what Honoria had whispered. "Do not come downstairs." He stood frozen in the dark, her hand tight around his wrist. Below them, the voices continued. 3 minutes. Maybe 4. Then the chair scraped again. Footsteps moved back to the front door. Open. Close. Silence. Lemuel did not go downstairs. Instead, he went to the window. The moon was bright enough to silver the yard. From their room, he could see the back porch, the barn, and the smokehouse. Cashin Pell crossed the yard below. He was carrying something long, something heavy. He unlocked the barn and went inside. For 11 or 12 minutes, he remained there. Then he came out empty-handed. He locked the barn again. As he crossed back toward the porch, he stopped, turned, and looked directly up at Lemuel's window. The room behind Lemuel was dark. No lamp burned. Cashin could not have seen him. But Cashin smiled. That same warm, wide smile. Then he went inside. The kitchen lamp went out, and the house became quiet again. The house stayed quiet after the kitchen lamp went dark. Too quiet. Lemuel sat in the chair beside the bed with the pistol resting across his knee while the fire shrank into dull orange embers. Verity lay awake beside him, staring toward the door, both of them listening to every creak the old farmhouse made. Outside, the wind had returned, but somehow it never seemed to touch the house itself. Around 3 in the morning, footsteps began climbing the stairs. Slow, measured, not hiding, not afraid of being heard. The steps paused twice before reaching their room, almost as if whoever was outside needed time to catch their breath. Then the footsteps stopped directly outside the door. For a long moment, there was nothing, only breathing, heavy breathing, the kind a man makes after running hard but trying not to sound tired. Lemuel tightened his grip on the pistol. Then came the voice. Soft, gentle. "Verity, come downstairs, dear. Your husband is asking for you." Verity nearly gasped. Because the voice was perfect. It was Cashin Pell's voice exactly. Not close. Exact. But Lemuel was sitting right there in the chair beside her. He pressed 2 fingers against her wrist before she could react, silently warning her to stay still. The voice came again. "Verity, your husband is waiting." This time, there was something wrong beneath the kindness. Something strained, like patience beginning to crack. Lemuel's mind raced. Cashin had no way of knowing he was awake. Cashin believed both of them were in bed. Whoever stood outside that door was speaking only to Verity, as if Lemuel had already been dealt with. Years later, when Lemuel finally wrote about that night, he underlined one sentence twice in his letter. It spoke as though I no longer existed. Outside the room, the voice tried again. Then again, each time slightly less gentle, slightly more irritated. Then silence. A long silence. And finally, in a voice barely above a whisper, They heard whoever stood outside mutter something under its breath. A curse, not loud enough to understand, but human frustration all the same. Then footsteps retreated down the hall. Verity slowly exhaled. Lemuel did not move. A few minutes later, the footsteps returned. This time there were two sets. The doorknob turned. Slowly at first, then harder. The latch rattled. The heavy iron lock Honoria had told them to use held firm. The knob twisted again. A shoulder pressed lightly against the wood. Testing. Not trying to break through. Just checking. The old door creaked under the pressure. Then came stillness again. But not empty stillness. Presence. Lemuel could feel somebody standing on the other side listening. Not for movement. For something else. As if they expected the room itself to give them permission. Then suddenly, weeping. A woman crying quietly outside the door. Not dramatic sobbing. The exhausted, hopeless crying of somebody trying desperately not to be heard. And beneath the crying came Cashin's voice again. Only now it sounded different. Tender. Almost disappointed. Honoria, he whispered. You promised. You promised you would not warn them. Verity closed her eyes. The crying continued for several seconds longer. Then the footsteps moved away. Downstairs. Silence returned to the house. Neither Lemuel nor Verity spoke for nearly an hour. At last, the small mantel clock on the dresser crept close to 4 in the morning. Lemuel stood. It was time to leave. Not at dawn. Not after breakfast. Now. They dressed without speaking. Boots. Coats. Small travel bag. Pistol. Nothing else. The wagon, their savings, the Bible from Verity's mother, the coffee tin, all of it remained outside. But both of them already understood something terrible. If they tried to retrieve everything, they would die there. The window had been painted shut, though not long ago. Lemuel worked carefully with the butt of the pistol until the frame cracked loose. Cold air rushed into the room. Below them sat the roof of the back porch. Lemuel climbed out first, then helped Verity down beside him. Every sound felt impossibly loud. The old porch groaned beneath their weight. The moon hung low now, throwing weak silver across the yard. The barn sat black and motionless at the edge of the property. Their horses were inside. Lemuel stared toward it for a long moment. He thought of the older mare pressing her forehead against his shoulder earlier that evening. He thought about telling her everything was fine. The memory made his stomach twist. Because he had lied. He would remember that lie for the rest of his life. Verity touched his sleeve gently. Lem. He looked at her. And in that moment, he made the decision that would haunt him forever. He left the horses. He left the wagon. He left every dollar they owned. Because all of it was behind locks controlled by Cashin Pell. And the only thing more valuable than what they owned was the chance to stay alive long enough to regret losing it. They slipped off the porch roof and crossed the yard carefully. The pasture fence creaked softly as they climbed over. Beyond it waited the woods. Dark. Cold. Endless. Lemuel knew the road back lay south. So he went east instead. Because of Honoria. Because somewhere deep inside, he believed she would lie for them if Cashin asked which direction they had run. And because south was too obvious. They walked through the woods until sunrise. Then they kept walking. Branches tore at their clothes. The ground climbed and dropped beneath them endlessly. Verity stumbled twice from exhaustion. The second time, she sat on a fallen log and covered her face with both hands. She did not cry. Not yet. Lemuel sat beside her and wrapped an arm around her shoulders. We're going, he whispered. Then again. We're going. Like a prayer. Like if he stopped saying it, they might somehow stop existing. The strangest part came later. For nearly 3 hours after leaving the house, Lemuel could still hear a voice somewhere behind them in the woods. Calling a name. Not Verity's name anymore. A different name. A man's name Lemuel had never heard before. The voice sounded calm. Patient. Almost neighborly. Like someone standing on a porch calling a family member home for supper. And the distance never changed. The voice did not grow closer. It did not fall farther behind. It remained exactly the same distance away for hours. Then suddenly, it stopped. All at once. Like a clock winding down. The silence afterward frightened Verity more than the voice had. That was when she finally began to cry. Close to noon, the woods finally opened onto a dirt track. The dirt track became a road. And the road led them to a crossroads store run by a one-armed war veteran named Cullen Rye. The moment Lemuel explained where they had come from, the old man went pale. Not confused. Not skeptical. Terrified. He sat slowly on a barrel of nails behind the counter and stared at them for a long time before finally speaking. "You're the third," he said quietly. Lemuel frowned. "Third what?" "The third couple to walk out of those woods alive." Cullen Rye told them everything. The first pair had appeared in 1870. The second in 1873. Always the same story. A farmhouse at the end of a wrong road. A smiling man. A thin gray-haired woman. A hot supper. A voice in the night calling the wife downstairs. And always the latch. The latch was the only reason any of them survived. Then Cullen opened a small wooden box from beneath the counter. Inside were newspaper clippings. Missing travelers. Vanished wagons. Couples who had disappeared while following roads that supposedly existed on official maps. One clipping stopped Verity cold. 3 days earlier, she and Lemuel had watered their horses beside the man shown in the article. A tall traveler with a beard. He had warned them to be careful of bad maps. Now he was missing. Cullen folded the clipping carefully. "I've got 9 of these," he said. 9 people last seen on roads that ended where roads shouldn't end. Lemuel asked the question neither of them truly wanted answered. Why hasn't somebody gone after them? The old man looked toward the woods through the dusty store window. "Because sometimes," he said quietly, "men go into places like that, and the place remains afterward." He told them about a deputy from Bedford who once investigated the property. The deputy returned home pale and shaken. A week later, he resigned. A month later, he moved his family 3 counties east and refused to explain why. Cullen never spoke the name Pell loudly. None of the locals did. It was treated almost like a curse. That night, Cullen Rye and his wife fed the Ashcrofts and let them sleep in the back room of the store. The next morning, Cullen drove them himself to Lynchburg and paid for their train tickets out of his own pocket. He refused repayment. "You're alive," he told them. "That's worth more than money." Lemuel and Verity left Virginia behind forever. By spring of 1877, they had settled in eastern Tennessee. Lemuel found work in a harness shop. Verity took sewing jobs. Slowly, painfully, they rebuilt a life from nothing. But they never truly escaped the house. For the rest of their marriage, neither of them could sleep in a room without a working latch on the door. Hotels, boarding houses, relatives' homes. If the door would not lock properly, Lemuel dragged furniture against it before sleeping. And he never explained why. Verity stopped cooking stewed apples entirely. The smell alone made Lemuel leave the room. And once every year, on the anniversary of the night they escaped, Verity quietly placed an extra plate at the dinner table. She never said who it was for. Lemuel never asked. Because deep down, both of them understood. It was for Honoria, the woman who warned them. The woman who had not escaped herself.